Welcome. It's good to have you back for another of our series, a long series in Biblical Worldview Study, and what can the American church share with the church in China to advance the kingdom there and to engage the culture in such a way that the Lord is glorified. And of course, to my left, Pastor Jian Zhu, who is usually the host for this program. I have the honor of being here with Jian for a special guest, a very, very noteworthy guest. And so our special guest is a cherished brother of mine, Pastor Clarence Washington. He's a pastor here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome so much for being here. We appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
And just real quick, we're going to be talking during the next hour about 4 very, very special books. And the title of this series is called Hijack. We're going to get into those in just a minute, but I also want you to know that our brother, Pastor Washington, that he is a man of prayer, deep prayer, committed deeply to prayer, and he also has a book out, Tools for Effective Prayer. And my wife has used this with Community Bible Study, and I have used this in my personal prayer life. And we couldn't go through the program without mentioning the book on prayer, because the story he's going to tell in these 4 volumes has to be bathed in prayer. So at this particular time, I'm going to be asking Pastor Washington questions about each one of the volumes. I've already completed volume number 1, and I've started volume number 2. So let's go ahead. We're going to start with volume 1 and tell us about the dream Dr. Martin Luther King had for America that God gave to him.
Okay, well, let me start off by saying that God gave Dr. King a dream, and in that dream, it gives us the goals that must be achieved and the methods that must be used to fix what is wrong with America. And it is a God-given dream, and so it is sure, if we persevere in that, it's sure to come about. In his dream, what I did was I dissected the dream into basically 7 parts. The first 3 parts are the methods that must be used. And the second 4 parts are the dream goals themselves. The methods must be used, and you'll see why I said it's a God-given dream, because the first method that must be used is that it must be in righteousness, forgiveness, and perseverance. And that's what I call dream method 1. And the second method that must be employed to fix what's wrong with America is self-respect and self-control, nonviolence, and unity. That's dream method number 2. So let me go back and say just a little bit now about righteousness, forgiveness, and perseverance. You know, Dr. King quoted Amos 5:4, I believe it was, and it says that righteousness must flow like a mighty river and justice like a mighty stream. And so you can't have justice without righteousness. And that is one thing I think that where we've missed the mark is that many times we want to live a life that is not rooted and grounded in righteousness, but yet we still want justice. And you can't have justice without righteousness. And then forgiveness, really big in dream method 1. For Dr. King's dream to become a reality in America or any place, it must be rooted and grounded in forgiveness. We must be willing to forgive everybody of everything, regardless of how heinous something might have happened to you. Slavery was very heinous. Jim Crow was very heinous that happened to black people in America. But we can't start to have his dream to become a reality in America until we totally forgive everybody of everything. And that's important because we must realize that forgiveness is the essence of who God is. And then the third part of this first method is perseverance. We must persevere in righteousness, persevere in forgiveness, because you can't be blessed if you don't persevere. Nonviolence, which is the very key to making the dream a reality. Let me say that Dr. King's dream is rooted and grounded in the American dream. The two are inseparable. He said many, many times, in speaking about his dream, that his dream was rooted and grounded in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so we see that Dr. King's dream is deeply grounded in the US Constitution, the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. Dr. King was indeed a patriot. He never would approve of such things as not honoring the American flag, kneeling during the national anthem. He never did that. For every civil rights march that he had, there was always many, many flags, but these flags were used to honor America and not to disrespect her. Secondly, his second goal was that his dream was characterized by his intense desire for freedom and justice. And as I previously said, freedom cannot be obtained without righteousness. They both go hand in hand. His second goal was his intense desire for hateful unforgiveness to be replaced with loving forgiveness. And I think that right now would probably be a good time for some questions. Bill, you have some questions?
Sure, sure. I noticed the similarities between the African-American experience here in the United States and also in China. There are similarities and there are differences. And one of the differences are that in the United States there was a racial difference. In China there's not a racial, but what there was similar, very, very similar, is the suffering component, because there was a tremendous amount of suffering among the African-American community here in the United States during the days of slavery, during Reconstruction, during the Jim Crow laws, and in some cases even through today. Pastor Washington is saying about the experience in America needs to be emphasized also, is that there first has to be righteousness, because without righteousness there cannot be the justice and the forgiveness.
Forgiveness is supernatural. You cannot do that without being born again, without being a believer in Jesus Christ. There's no way that you can forgive people for many, many years of oppression. There is no other way that you can have the kind of relationship, have a right standing with God without forgiveness. You must forgive everybody of everything without exception.
And that was all a part of Dr. Martin Luther King's dream.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and talk about Volume 2 of the Hijack, okay? In Volume 2, this is the Hijack itself. Explain what do you mean by the Hijack?
Well, okay, it's like a train going down the track and it's derailed. The dream was thrown off course. It was stopped in its track, if you will. When Dr. Martin Luther King first spoke his dream, at that very time it was already being derailed, because while he was telling what his dream was, there were evil forces in our nation that were already planning and plotting its demise. When I say hijack, because it covers a lot of things, if we look at what is happening in America, there are evil forces that are trying to prevent the American dream of free market and capitalism from going any further. There are people that are power hungry, that they want to change our nation into a Marxist, a socialist / Marxist / communist nation, and they will do anything to do it. And one of the things that they do, in Volume 2, I talk about this man called Saul Alinsky, which was from Chicago, the same city that we are from. And Saul Alinsky, he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals, and in his book, he gives the rules and tactics that you must do in order to bring about a revolution in America where you replace capitalism with Marxism. And one of his basic rules is that in order to get a people to change from the secure environment that they're in to a Marxist government, you must create a mass of dissatisfied people, a dissatisfied mass of people, in order to get them to change from where they are to where you want them to be. And so what Hijack does, it shows all these ways that people have been made to be dissatisfied. If you will notice that one of the ways that black people, African-American people, who are the most easily manipulated because of our history, is that there has been the lie that has been told, and all of Saul Alinsky's methods are lies, deception, and manipulations. And his philosophy is the end justifies the means. And whereas Dr. King said that the end is pre-existent in the means, Saul Alinsky says that the end justifies any means. And so what has happened is that the lie has been told that black people are no better off today than they were 50 years ago. It's been told that America is systemic or institutionally racist, and he's done that to make black people dissatisfied with the American way of living, with the capitalistic system. The lie's been told that there's systemic racism in America, that things aren't any better today than they were 50 years ago, to get black people and other people of color to hate white people. There's now the move afoot to what's called the critical race theory, to say that all white people, because they are white, because of the color of their skin, that they are oppressors, and that black people or other people of color are their victims, to get white people to hate themselves. This is indeed a demonic and evil force that is occurring. And then when you look at one of the other mains, which is the black liberation theology, which was started by James Cone and has been promoted by men like Cornel West, they have promoted the victimology narrative to try and encourage black people to believe that they are victims and that they can never do anything because the white man has kept them in bondage, and so they are slaves to white America, if you will. But all of them are based in the idea of creating a dissatisfied mass of people. People are dissatisfied with the way America is now ran or governed, so that they be willing to change.
So Pastor Washington, Volume 1 is The Dream of Martin Luther King. Volume 2 is The Hijacked, and you identified some of the players. The history books are full of information. I would challenge anybody to follow your research, and we need to remember that, you know, one of the things that makes us different with say for instance like with Cornel West is that he would say that our primary identity is victim or abuser, when in reality our primary identity is an image bearer of the living God.
Yes.
And now we want to ask some questions regarding each one of these volumes. So let's go ahead and start with volume number 1, okay? And again, volume number 1 is Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream, okay? And it was a God-given dream, and it dovetailed with the American dream, okay? Can you share with us how it dovetails with the American dream? And can you see any way that can relate to what is going on in China with the Chinese church? So two things. Give an example of how the dream of Martin Luther King dovetails with the American dream, and how that dream is not just for Americans, it's for people in China as well.
I think all Americans want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, okay? That's something that we all want. Okay, so there is no disagreement about that whatsoever. You talk to black Americans, Chinese Americans, whatever Americans, we want life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, plain and simple. We all want a good life for our children, okay? We all want a good education for our children, okay? We want to live a good life, okay, life, liberty, and the opportunity to have a successful happiness, because the government can't give us happiness. And that's what Americans want. We want life, liberty, and the opportunity to pursue happiness.
Right.
Which God is the main.
So, yeah, Pastor, I have a question that you mentioned that very early on when Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream, and those days it's already has some kind of a tendency to be hijacked. Mm-hmm. How did that happen? That some people want to derail the dream?
Okay, how that happened was that early on there were laws that were being passed that were not in keeping with Dr. King's dream. Okay, early on, for example, remember now I said that that black genocide had started with Margaret Sanger back in 1921. So that was continuing. The black genocide was continuing. Laws that were being passed for how the welfare system would be administered. And that was that, one, the fathers could not be in the home in order to receive welfare. Well, right away, that hijacked his dream, because without the father in the home, there was going to be more crime committed by those children of fatherless homes. There would going to be less motivation to get a higher education.
In this particular example, you mentioned it's the policy.
Yes.
That affected the Dr. Martin Luther King's dream.
Yes. It's not systemic racism that has caused black people not to be successful. It's systemic legalized abortion, systemic poor or mediocre schools, and not having school choice available. It's a dysfunctional worldview the elites in this nation have passed down underprivileged communities, okay? And then these dysfunctional worldviews are then reinforced by other people that are looking for victims to stay in power.
Right.
From the beginning of the time that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke this dream out, there were people that were looking for victims, looking for people with dysfunctional worldviews that they can enforce those worldviews so they can stay in power.
So you may trace back, it's a long history
Yes.
to hijack.
Yes.
So now in the year 2021, how do you see, the situation in America? It's worsening. It has a long history up to the point that today, what happened, the critical race theory or the divided nation, it has a long history coming down the road.
It's ripened. Things have gotten worse and worse as time has gone on. If you don't solve the issues, they just get worse as time goes on. We have gotten to the point, after all of these years, where we are suffering the consequences of what we did in past years. There's what I call generational curses, if you will. The Bible talks about generational curses.
Right.
Things that are passed down from one generation to the next.
Right.
And so then people get stuck in those generational curses, and they become more hard and harder to break.
I think your explanation will help a lot of Chinese people, Chinese Christians, because they are so shocked or really want to know what America happened to these days. How all this happened? They immigrate to America, they love America, but nowadays they see America is totally different than they expected. I think your book and your explanation will help them to understand. So Bill, you want to
Sure.
continue?
Well, I think it's important for us to understand that whether we're talking about Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and other organizations here, or whether it is systemic in China, that what they have in common is that they're functioning off of a Marxist perspective that's based on the naturalistic worldview that says that God does not exist. We as Christians are here with the good news that God does exist, that there's a basis for faith, there's a basis for hope, and a basis for love. And with faith, hope, and love, we can begin to implement the things that Pastor Washington shared with us from Dr. Martin Luther King's dream, in that there can be forgiveness. There can be, if there's no God, righteousness doesn't exist. The only thing you could say is, well, there's behavior. You can't say it's right or wrong. But because God does exist, and because of his holy nature, we know what's right, we know what's wrong, we know what is righteousness. And for people to think that justice can come without a basis, which is righteousness, it's not going to come. All men, Black, Asian, European, all are created equal in God's image and likeness, and he is the one that has given us the right to life.